Have a really good program coming up. We're going to start off with Jeremy. This is a student's perspective of learning at McPherson College. And I have a soft spot for a number of institutions. McPherson's one of them. Ken and I got to meet a number of times in Allentown. Dealt with his students for a number of years now. It's great. We've got, of course, now Belmont Abbey has joined the regime, I guess. Of course, Alfred State. So we're starting to develop something here. And what we're going to get from Jeremy, who is local, by the way, is a different perspective than what us older people have about things. Okay, Jerry, take it away.
Hello all, my name is Jeremy Porter. This is my first kind of speaking experience like this since 8th grade, so this is going to be quite new for me, but we'll see how that goes. So I'm a student at McPherson College. I'm here with two faculty members at our school, Christy Sokia and Ken Yan. Ken is our department chair of history and politics, while Christy is our librarian and manages our archives, both of which they'll touch on. But I am from this area. I'm from Seneca Falls. I was not born into a car family at all, but I did attend the vintage races down at Watkins Glen. And that's sort of how I got started in this area. I love history first, and a combination of vintage motorsports and going fast and stuff like that is kind of what I fell in love with. McPherson College is a small liberal arts school in McPherson, Kansas. We have roughly 800 students, 160 of which are in our automotive restoration program. Our automotive restoration program is a 4-year school where you learn basic maintenance skills and automotive skills on top of also taking your general liberal arts education. So you take communication, writing, your maths, your sciences, your history, and with all of that, you get a very unique educational experience. We have a very small campus, as you can expect from 800 students. The two major areas for automotive students on campus is number 20, Templeton. That is where all of our mechanical work is performed. We have our own collection of cars, roughly 85. They range from roughly 1876, 1877. We have a copy of the Mercedes-Benz patent wagon, the first vehicle that was made, and we focus up until really 1973. Some vehicles that are part of our highlights is we have a Porsche 356, a couple Lincolns, a Mercedes-Benz 300S, Model Ts, Model As, along those likes. And then the other major building is the Miller Library, which Christy will talk about more. That is where our archives and our automotive restoration library is located. But surprisingly, not really unsurprisingly, but we have a third space. Within urban planning and whatnot, third spaces are places outside of your work and home where socializing occurs, where you can meet new people. The Sheds is a warehouse-like building right across from Templeton that is not owned by the college, so it is not under college jurisdiction. So some shenanigans do get up. But students are able to implement what they learn in class, and they work on their own vehicles. Practically everyone has a project car out there. My own vehicle is a 1965 Pontiac GTO, but there's all types of vehicles there. And because we're all young and we want to go fast, there's a very strong culture of hot rodding there. Kids will soup up their Model A's and Model T's just like they were from the 1950s, using vintage speed parts, not using parts that were made new. There's a very strong focus on being period correct and looking up to and using companies and people's names like Moroso or Edelbrock, using pure 1970s, 1950s instead of recalculated made new parts. And a very strong focus, because we are a liberal arts school, we have a very strong financial backing, which we're very lucky to have because of our very unique program. There's lots of school support within the automotive restoration program. Ken was lucky enough to take a group of students to Europe this past winter on a Cars and Castles trips where we visited collections such as the Schlumpf Museum, the Porsche collection, the Mercedes collection, and the Laumann Museum. And with our ties that we have all over the automotive industry, we were able to get backroom access to the Porsche factory and Mercedes factories and see their own physical restoration departments where with their road cars, they're also doing race car work. When we pulled into the Porsche Museum, right beside us was a Porsche 959 Dakar car that was being pulled into their workshop. So it's just stuff like that. Last year, I was fortunate enough with 3 other students and one of our professors, Luke Chennel, who's a part of the American Bugatti Club, to attend the Bugatti rally here at Watkins Glen. Every single year, students help create a rally manual, usually focused on the Bugatti Type 13 Brescia. And this past year, on this trip, you just get to be around race cars and physically learn the technologies. When I am looking at vintage cars like this, I am focusing on the technologies. Within the automotive tract at school, there are 5 different emphases. Technology, where you're physically working on the cars, history, communications, business and management, and automotive design. But just because you're in those 5 different tracks doesn't mean you can't do other things. I'm a technology major. I'm doing an independent study centered around Duesenberg blueprints, which I'll touch on momentarily. And I just approached members at the school and said, hey, I'm interested in about this history. Can I do this project? And they were very supportive of it. But on these sort of school trips, you get to physically see the technologies and parts that you're learning about in school while also talking to the owners and people who are more knowledgeable about it. So in this bottom photo there, the 3 students and a professor were looking at the front axle arrangement on a Type 35 Bugatti. Bugattis were very unique in their front axle arrangements and that their front suspension runs through the frame rails. And when you're assembling them, you have to be very, very precise to make sure they're located in the same, where they're supposed to be. Bill Milliken, with chassis 4906, the first thing he did when he bought Type 35 was lengthen the wheelbase by 4 inches, and he was having problems locating that front springs where they were supposed to be. And then that top photo on a Type 57, this car came out of France. It went to California in the 1960s. The owners, the Cleary families, the first thing he did was chop 18 inches out of the frame, put a Type 55 body onto it, and go racing. And the family still races it like that way today. But the clutch mechanism went out on it. And they were not going to race for the rest of the weekend. And this student and I'm on the left in the white. The other student's name is Matthew Croker. He now works at a shop in Colorado. He does rally work and preps for the Colorado Grand, which features race cars all across. Leading up to 1955, we just said, hey, we'd like to take a crack at it. We've read the manuals and whatnot. Bugattis have a very unique clutch mechanism. It acts as a lever from the top. And the owner was like, sure, take a crack at it. And we were able to fix it in the hour and a half that we had before his next session. And it's still running. As he said, I saw him at Pebble Beach this last summer. Speaking of Pebble Beach, I got to go to Pebble Beach this past year. The school had restored a Mercedes-Benz 300S Cabriolet. I was a part of that. There's a later photo of the car that you will see. But as a part of that, I got to attend Laguna Seca and see, again, race cars in action, owners driving them, pushing them to the limits. See a 312P, which there's 3 of in the world, chassis 0872, the only Berlinetta, being driven at 100% by a professional racing driver. It's things like those, seeing the technologies in the cars in person, which I like. But as a part of that, things break, which is not good. And blueprints, specifically older blueprints, are very important to keeping those cars going. So with that, I spent my 2022 summer at an internship in Wisconsin. Our school is very good with internships. We have a career fair in February. We usually have around 50 people come looking for interns, and then outside of that, there's always more people looking for interns. You can do mechanical work, museums, collections, auction houses. We had 2 former students roughly 6 or 7 years ago who helped finish the Shelby registry, documenting all those cars and the histories of them for the Shelby owners. There's alums that work in auction houses, writing auction houses descriptions, selling the cars, researching the cars, working with people like Marcel Massini, and just documenting everything there is to be documented, finding photos that don't exist, reaching out to archives like the IMRRC, working with them and whatnot. And it's really, really good. But I was out shopping Wisconsin, Motion Products. I am a Ferrari fan, and I was able to be around race cars and learn about them. Some of the cars that I worked on, that top left there is a 121 LM, chassis 0484. It is a 6-cylinder Ferrari. It's a 4.4-liter straight six. That car was owned by Tony Paravano out in California, and is the only one bodied like that. It has an increased radiator front opening, and a very interesting history. It was raced by Carroll Shelby and Phil Hill, and Tony Paravano disappeared in Mexico after being chased by the IRS. The bottom left there, that is a 250 GTO, a chassis 4153 GT. It finished fourth at Le Mans in 1963, and then won the Tour de France Auto in 1964, driven by Lucien Bianchi. That is the former most expensive car in the world, recently broken. But here I am as a 20-year-old, 3 weeks into my internship, working on a 250 GTO, learning about them, learning about the history of that specific car, learning about the history of the other 35 chassis, what sets them apart and whatnot. That 405 that's splattered on that hood there, that is a Mille Miglia winning car, chassis 0082. That is the 1951 winner. That car finished second in class at Pebble Beach not this past Pebble Beach 2023, but 2022. Some parts I made for that was a steering column lock to hold the steering wheel in place. I worked off 2 photos taken at the 1951 Mille Miglia, and that's all I had. No dimensions, no anything. So I had to make that out on a lathe and follow the correct curvatures and whatnot. And then that bottom car there, probably the most unhappy looking person to ever sit in a Formula One car, is me, sitting in a Ferrari 641, which competed in the 1990 season. That specific chassis is the chassis that Alain Prost drove in the 1990 Suzuka GP, where famously Senna may or may not have crashed into him on purpose, and is up to interpretation and depending on who you ask. But an engine was rebuilt for that. It's a 60 valve, 5 valve per head, 3.5 liter V12, and 2 weeks into my internship, I was shown how to disconnect the drivetrain, the engine and gearbox from the tub, and perform a camshaft inspection, and I did that by myself. Very much thrown into the depths of it. But what I'm here mostly to talk about is an archival project that I'm partaking in. Roughly 20 years ago, Augie Duesenberg's grandson donated 106 blueprints to our school, and since then they've been sitting in 2 drawers. These Duesenberg blueprints were taken by Augie when the Cord bought Duesenberg from the 2 brothers. Augie wanted nothing to do with the road cars anymore. Fred stayed on and helped with the development of the J's, but Augie just wanted to do racing, as mostly everyone does. And it's a mixture of Indianapolis motors, Duesenberg Model J and Model A motors, some rear axle assemblies, and then just over roughly half of them are to a W24, which was actually used in marine engine that was built for Horse Dodge. And they're relevant to our program because you are able to practice and learn archival skills, research. If you want to, you can recreate parts using the blueprints, which is a little side project that I am doing at school. And they're just cool. Who doesn't want to see life-size motors and that are over 100 years old? There's just some pictures on the left here of that W24 motor. The bottom is the engine roughly when it was rebuilt. I was lucky enough to see this motor 3 weeks ago and hear it run. It sounds like an entire field of Miller-Raffi midgets. It's 625 cubic inches with a supercharger. And it spins to 5,000 RPM. It's a lot of noise. But it had a whole development cycle over roughly 10 years with different methods and different construction, things that were added, things that were subtracted from it. And what I'm doing is researching and creating a little story, a little book if I want to, of the story of that specific engine. But automotive-wise, these are blueprints to a 1926 Duesenberg IndyCar motor, 91.5 cubic inches, 1.5 liters. It's a straight 8, and it used Babbitt bearings, but it is not a 4-stroke. It is a 2-stroke. One motor was built, as far as I can tell, I was talking to Randy Ema, who is the premier Duesenberg expert in the country, and it was ran in one car, and there's 3 articles on the internet about this car, and that's it. And it just mentions it's a 2-stroke motor. It wasn't allowed to go past 4,600 RPM. This motor no longer exists anymore, but we have the crankcase, the cylinder heads, the camshaft profiles, the camshaft profile charts with flow rates that they were able to see, trying out to see how much power they could get out of it. And they're all in good condition, and there's nothing really written about this, and you can see the technical differences from a 4-stroke motor. So like in our engines class, when you're teaching about 4-strokes and 2-strokes, you could go and look at a physical blueprint that shows the different construction methods and help you envision in your brain what your professor is talking about. And then marine-wise, I was 3 weeks ago, as I mentioned, I was able to see parts and the boat and the engine, and that is a timing cover chain for the motor. It's all dual overhead cams, 6 camshafts. It's a little bit of a pain to time, but the owners of the boat still have some original parts, and they were kind enough to show me. So I grabbed some photos of those parts, and it was cool to see, because I have photos on my phone right now, just on my phone. We have not digitized them quite yet. Next Monday is when we're actually going to start the digitization process, hopefully. We'll be properly archiving them and creating a true archive with them. They'll be scanned at 600 dpi, and we hope to make them digitally available for people to learn about. But it was just cool for me to see that these physical parts were made from those blueprints right there. And those blueprints exist in one other place, and that's out in California in a private collection that isn't shown. I'm a firm believer that these things need to be shown and need to be shared for people to learn about. It's the same thing with racing cars. I think that they should be driven. I don't think that they should sit in a collection. Although there is discussion about that, because when you have original cars or cars that were extremely important, it gets a little shady, and I'm open to discussion about that with anyone. But it's a cool project that I wanted to talk about, because there is a younger generation that's interested in this, and McPherson is a great way to get into this world and whatnot. We have contacts all over, and it's not just physically working on the cars, because it's the story of the people that designed them, the people who worked on them, the people who drove them, the people who owned them later on in life. The family that owns that boat now, he bought the engine in the early 90s and wanted to build a land speed car. And once he found out it was for a boat, he was like, okay, we're going to recreate that boat and recreate that hull, because it's something that is important to the marine racing world. He had never built a boat before, so him and his son just went and started building a boat using the original hull plans, because they found the original family the 2 brothers built the boat in the mid-1930s. It's the story of people and them interacting with people. And I think just using those blueprints, using a car, it's a medium to do that, because it's about the people that makes me love this industry, not the cars themselves, although they are great. So thank you. I'm free to answer any questions about the program, about the project, about anything.
First thing, right off the bat, I hope you're coming back next year and take my job. Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I've already gotten a bunch of comments texted to me. Yeah, you hit it out of the ballpark, really. You had a question over here. Hang on.
So you mentioned that you are from up here in Seneca Falls area. How is the move going from up here down to Kansas and the completely different area, opposite side of the Mississippi?
Not very fun. I grew up on a lake. Not having any bodies of water near me has been quite a change. No hills or anything like that. Mm-hmm. But I've grown to appreciate it. It's its own unique place, its own unique culture. And even though we're a small school, there's a very strong sense of camaraderie. And within the automobile industry, restorations, auctions, and stuff like that, you say you're from McPherson College, and it opens up doors just all over the world. You can walk into the Mercedes-Benz Classic Center in California and say, I'm from McPherson College, could you show me around? And you'd be let in because the president of that is on our board at our school, and the vice president is an alumni of our college. So it just opens up an entire world. It's great.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
That was easy. So for someone who's maybe looking into that program, can you expand on the advantages of a four-year program, coming from a liberal arts background versus maybe what we might consider the more traditional sort of trade approach in this country?
Yes, so it's very much geared more towards restoration and not maintenance and stuff like that. If you're restoring a historically significant car, you want to get the details right. An example of this is that car right there. 10 years ago, our school set a goal to compete at the Pebble Beach Concours d'Elegance with a car entirely restored by 20-year-olds against people who have been doing this for 40 years and know every trick in the book. That car is a 1953 Mercedes-Benz 300S Cabriolet. 203 were made in that body style, 560 overall. It uses a triple Solex carb 3-liter straight six. It's the same motor that's used in the gull wings, but it's just not fuel injected and with a not as hot cam. But this car has 13,000 individual parts. A gull wing has 6,500. It has a chassis lubrication system. And our car was special order with a different kind of chassis lubrication system. So we had to find the original Bakelite piece from 1953, and roughly 80 of those cars were optioned, so there's only 80 made, because we didn't have ours anymore, by Argus, and then show a photo documenting that our car had it. These cars had silver cad electrical connectors. We had to go and find press photos from 1951 from the Mercedes factory showing, yes, these are supposed to be silver cad, they're not supposed to be like that. And then probably the most obvious one, which we were asked about at the show by the judges, is radiator hoses, because most people are used to seeing gull wings. These are a steel braid woven radiator hose and water-cooled hose, and all the other ones they had seen were just black, and they had to double check and ask if this is supposed to be correct. And you just open the binder and there's a photo right there. So being able to know how to find your photos in your research, very, very important. And then being able to have the skills to implement that is very important as well. And that school, and that's what sets us apart from other two-year programs around. Because you don't have to just go physically into the restoration world. For example, I've mentioned you can go into auction houses. You can go as just a general historian. You can go and work in insurance. You can go and manage a shop. You don't have to physically just work on the cars. And you're not just learning about the cars you're interested in. I had no appreciation for pre-war vehicles or European vehicles before I went to school there. I was a muscle guy through and through. And now I'm into Ferraris, pre-war Alphas, and pre-war Bugattis, and just GP cars. And if I didn't go to school, I would not be into those things.
Jeremy, have you had any contact with the Auburn Cord Duesenberg Museum? I guess you've talked with Brandon Anderson, I guess, at the director at all?
I have not yet, because there's a story about those our Duesenberg blueprints. They were looking to get those, but they were donated to us. But I think that cooperation is needed between the two. I mean, once they're digitized, they're going to be available for everyone to see. And it's important to the Duesenberg legacy. They already have an established museum around Auburn Cord Duesenbergs. And even with us still having the original Duesenberg blueprints, you can still print off one-to-one size copies of them once they're digitized, and they can have them on display, for example, and stuff like that. Yeah. So I think that cooperation is needed between people in this industry, because there's historians out there who just want to hoard information and not share it with people, when I think that it's just for everyone to know.
If you need help, there's some people who can open the doors, no problem. Yeah. Any more questions, please?
No idea. So Ferrari mechanicals have always come up, along with obviously the history side. I'm a chassis number person, if you haven't been able to tell. I was able to visit a shop out in California, which is renowned, which my best friend now works at, actually. She was able to work on a 312P. When I visited, she was working on a 246 Dino, Daytonas. There's an F50 GT in there. And then their shop owners also run a 750 Monza on the track and actually race it all over the world. So that would be a fun experience if I would get to do that. We'll see. But I am just trying to figure out what's going to be best for me.
Thank you. Thank you.
That is the future, ladies and gentlemen. We're in good hands.
Next up, also from McPherson, and I don't envy you. Holy mackerel, I've been in your shoes having to follow and act like that. But anyway, Christy Sonia will talk about the archival aspects of McPherson.
That's your next slide, obviously. So either here or there. Okay.
Okay.
All right, good afternoon. I am Christy Soika, and I am in my third year as director of Miller Library at McPherson College. And it was actually the automotive restoration department that, in a roundabout way, brought me to McPherson. I was working as the head of instruction and circulation at another university in Wichita, which is where I live. It's about an hour south of McPherson. And my third oldest son was trying to figure out where he was going to go to college. And he was looking at some two-year associate degree programs in automotive. And I had heard about McPherson College's program, I think, through some library contacts that I knew. I can't remember for sure, but I said, hey, I sent him the link to the website and said, check this out. And he said, yeah, this looks more like what I really want to do. And so we went to the campus for a visit for our son. And as we progressed through that day, I came away with this this feeling, and I can only describe it as this a vibe that I was getting as we met people. Everyone we encountered welcomed us. They said hello. And this was a community vibe that I was not feeling on my current campus where I was working. And so, at the end of that day, I said, Riley, I think this is really the place that you want to be. Of course, it's your decision. But he decided yes. And so he applied. He was accepted and was on his way to getting started the next fall. And in June of that year, I received an email through a listserv that I subscribed to, a library listserv, and there was a job opening at McPherson College for the Director of Library Services. And it was my goal to become a library director, and I kept thinking about this positive feeling that I had when I was on that campus, and so I applied for the job. And then I asked Riley, hey, is this okay? And he was like, I guess. I came out for my interview, and one of the people that I got to meet with that day was the head of our auto restoration program. And she shared with me this plan that had been started at this point for renovating a part of the library to dedicate for our automotive restoration materials collection. And so, so that was kind of my first introduction to that collection. And so, yeah, I ended up getting the job, and I accepted. And I like to say, you know, follow me for more parenting tips. This is how you follow your kid to college. So if anyone's interested in doing that, that's how you do it. But I always show this slide in all of my presentations when I present to students on campus, just referencing our mission for the library. And we're really here, we're really on campus to provide access to information and then to help our students to, you know, learn how to locate, use, and evaluate the information that they're coming into contact with. I want to give you a little rundown of kind of an overall view of our library resources. So currently we have about 55,000 physical items. This is our whole collection, including books, DVDs, and periodicals. We have 145,000 ebook titles available to us currently. And this number, 10,500, is a little different. In your program it says 5,000 active automotive restoration titles. This number has actually grown to 10,500 just in a short period. It continues to grow almost on a daily basis, and I'll talk about why a little bit later. We also have about 60 databases providing access to thousands of academic journals, streaming films, including documentaries, and then more such as newspapers. I just added last week a brand new to us database with the automotive restoration program in mind. It is Chilton Library. It will have access to all of Chilton's repair manuals online. That way, I mean, although we do have repair manuals as part of our library collection, our students will be able to access these from the sheds, for example. So when they're out there working on their cars, they'll be able to access that important information. So when I arrived at McPherson and Miller Library, the automotive restoration collection was housed in a room. Now, it's an okay-sized room, but the collection had grown so much that the room was basically crammed full of the books and magazines. The shelving, you know, was like ceiling height, and it was very dark in there when everything was still in that room. And it was cramped, and there wasn't a lot of room for our students to work. And so the vision was to create a space that would be more accessible to our students. And so through the generosity of Melanie and Richard Lundquist, who donated a $1 million gift to us to put towards the renovation of a wing of the upper level of the library, we were able to dedicate the Paul Russell and Company Center for Automotive Research in May of 2022. 2022, sorry. And this space has created just a lot more room for our students and for other researchers to come and access our collections. And I have a little drawing here of our floor plan for the library. The plan on the left is our main floor, and this is where the former space was located, in that room circled in red. And on the other side, you will see the second floor where the Paul Russell and Company Center is now located, and it encompasses that entire wing of the library at this point. So you can see a significant size difference. Little note on some of our collection. It encompasses a number of periodicals, numerous books. Some of the books are very old and very fragile, and I'll talk about what we've done to try to preserve those, but also make them available for students. We also have a large collection of dealership brochures going back, I don't know, I know I'm thinking clearly of the 50s, but I'm sure further back than that. I'm thinking about a particular assignment that a professor assigns, and they go back to the 50s on that. And then we have a large collection of manuals, so repair manuals for our students. Space-wise, we've got a 2,900 square feet open collection that also provides a variety of study space for students. And last night we had the pleasure of having dinner with Jeremy's parents, and his mom asked Jeremy, before this space was open and available to you, did you spend much time in the library? Did you use this collection? And he said, no. So it really has made a difference opening this space up on our upper level. It is not restricted. Any student from across disciplines, across campus, can feel free to come to this space and use it to study. It is very bright, very light. But this also, the space houses our open part of our collection. We also have 1,296 square feet of restricted space, which is enclosed in a glass room. And this space we keep it locked because these are materials that we consider to be more rare, more difficult to replace if something were to happen to them. But we do provide study spaces within this room so that our students and our researchers can still access these items. They just come to us at the front desk and ask to be let in, and we unlock that room for them, and they are able to work in there. And then we also have a small office for our auto restoration students who work at the library. They do some of their work from this room. It's located right alongside these other spaces, and this makes them available for any other students who have questions. And they're very familiar with these collections. They use them and they work with them on a daily basis. So I thought it was important to have them upstairs right there. So within this special collection, we have a couple of smaller special collections, one being our dealership brochures. And as I said, these go back quite a ways. This filing cabinet is almost full, and I have another room full of brochures. And it's a beautiful collection to see what the dealers were highlighting, who they were targeting with their advertising. I like to have students think about some of those questions of like, who was the target audience for this? Was it, the wife and mother? Was it, the single bachelor? It depends on the automobile. And then Jeremy spoke about those Duesenberg blueprints, and these are the drawers where they have been, as he mentioned. And Jeremy, from I think my first day almost at McPherson, has been knocking down my door to figure out how can we digitize these. And it was a brilliant solution to have him work on this as an independent study. And so he is doing this research of what do we need to do to make that happen. A little bit about some of the collaborations that I am privileged to work with. I have a quote that is on a sticky note on the bottom of my desktop computer at work, and it says, leadership is about relationships. Build them. And I really believe that. And so I work very hard to build partnerships across campus with our various faculty. And I've worked very closely with the automotive restoration faculty. And so our professors who teach intro to automotive restoration, they bring their freshman students over during the fall semester, and we do an orientation with the collection and the space, and they get a tour, and they get to kind of start getting a feel for everything that we have available for them. And then I also offer library instruction, and this is where faculty will invite me to meet with their classes to talk about the ways that our resources and our services can help them. One of the partnerships that I've been involved with, our professor who teaches advanced trim approached me and said, I'd like for my students to do a research presentation, and I want them to specifically use the brochures in the collection. And so we worked together to create something that allows that to happen. I also have some really important relationships that I have built with the student library employees who are automotive restoration majors. And this photo, there are 5 of them who were a part of helping us get the Paul Russell and Company Center up and going. They physically moved materials from that first floor up to the second floor. And so we included them in that day because it was really important for me to recognize the hard work that they had put forth. But I also, I try to identify their strengths and their interests, and they have projects that I give them that will hopefully help them to explore those strengths and interests at a deeper level. So when I started out thinking about what I would include in this presentation, I was thinking about some of the challenges of curating this type of collection. And donations came to mind when I was thinking about challenges. Although there are many, many benefits to the donations that we receive. These photos are from 4 separate storage spaces that I have currently in the library. This is why the collection keeps growing. We have a backlog right now of donations. I have 2 of our automotive restoration students who are working through this backlog. They are cataloging, sorting, processing, doing all the things that we need to get these items on our shelves. And so that is how it keeps growing. And like I said, it's pretty much on a daily basis because at least one of them is working each day. So, and that is, for these 2 students, it is their primary focus this year. So as we work through the backlog, we continue to get more donations. I I just received a large donation of books and magazines from a very kind lady named Nancy who lives in Des Moines. And she heard about us from actually one of our internship employers. And so she reached out, and we've been talking since May. And we were finally able to work through the logistics and get her collection to the college last month. And so that is another relationship that I work to cultivate, is those people who are looking for a place for, usually it's for their loved ones, collections that relate to the cars or vehicles that were interesting to them. And so I have had people come from, I had a lovely couple from New Jersey who came to see me last year to bring me a collection. Another couple, I think they were from, I want to say Michigan, but became very emotional because these were her father's books, and they were so excited that our students would benefit, and that someone would continue to benefit from the books that they were bringing us. And so really the challenge is having the space to continue to store them. Jeremy mentioned Templeton, and even over there, they had a couple of pallets of donations that we just brought over to the library in the last couple of weeks. So it's an ongoing, continuous cycle, but the real challenge is the space issue. And I hope that it continues to be an issue, because it is a wonderful way for us to add to our collection and to support the learning of our students. Okay, and with that, I am open to any questions.
Thank you, Chrissy. Questions? Okay.
So first, a short self-interested question. Do you participate in interlibrary loan so we can borrow your stuff?
Yes, we do. And so anything that is in that open collection, the things in the restricted collection, we do not send out because of the rarity and the value, but anything that's in the open collection can be borrowed through interlibrary loan.
Yeah, that's good news. Thank you.
Yeah.
The larger question is, what's the college's current relationship with Hagerty?
You know, I don't have an answer for that question. That is a good, okay, Jeremy can answer that, actually.
They are very strong supporters of the school. McPherson actually helped found our automotive restoration board. There's a board for the school, and there's a board specifically for our program. But these events such as Pebble Beach, people lunch there every summer at the Longquist residence. They sponsor a lunch for their internship students, scholarship students, to meet with members of that kind of world. So actually this past summer, I had lunch with McKeel Hagerty, which was great. But Hagerty is very supportive of our school. I know we have some alums that work there. Probably the one I know most off the top of my head, his name is Kyle Smith. He is actually an author for him and writes articles specifically within the motorcycles. So it's not just cars.
I'll leave it at that. But the question, thanks. The question I had was, how many restoration students work in the library?
So this year we have 4, The last 2 years, it's been 5. Just worked out that it was 4 this year. So I try to keep, I like that number of 4 to 5. And I'll tell you, I have 4 restoration students out of 11 total. So they make up a good amount of our student employees.
Now, I understand you have a summer program.
Yes, the Summer Institute.
Yeah.
I know a little about that, but Jeremy might be more.
So I apologize, maybe just a better question for him, but I guess in the greater scheme of things, do you have programs for adults, continued, learning education, things like that, for those of us who maybe aren't lucky enough to be, 18 again?
Yes, so our Summer Institute is actually a perfect opportunity for anyone, I believe. Jeremy, is that correct? Anyone who has an interest can come and participate in the Summer Institute. So, yeah.
Very cool, thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you, Christy. That was great. Thank you. Very informative. And next, Kenyon has been there for a while now, I guess. 25 years. Yeah, I was going to say, been there for a good while. A lot of students have gone through the school. And he's going to give you an idea about the teaching the undergraduate aspects of this. And here we go. Okay, Ken, thank you. Take it away.
Bit. So I can't escape my classroom habits. So we have a short list of things we want to discuss today. I want to give you an idea of what liberal arts means. There was a question about that earlier, and why we really think that's the way to approach that for our institution. The breakdown of the fields that we use when we teach it, and then talk about how we fold history all the way through the curriculum. It's not something that's added to the curriculum. It's actually, it permeates it, and then some time for questions and consequences. So in a liberal arts context, we formed about 25 years ago something called an IMG statement, and it was a dream of like what we would like a McPherson graduate to be. And we were keeping in mind that in the long term, people change careers again and again and again. And if we were going to prepare people for careers and actually become involved in their lives, we had to think in a bigger picture about what kind of competencies they needed. And it came from so many different directions in different ways. One of the ways it happened in our college is we had this unique history as a small agricultural college. We're the last private college in Kansas that had an agriculture program. And so there was a real hands-on approach to understanding how you solve problems and working with machinery. And then in the early 70s, we had a local car collector who he just loved cars, and he was a very casual collector. He would buy them at auctions and put them in a shed, and he just liked to look at them. And he came to the college president and said, "I've got all these cars. You could probably fix them, couldn't you?" And the president said, "I don't know." And the guy said, "Well, I've got some money." And the college president said, "Yeah, we can fix those." And so they built a building, and they started an associate's degree. And then we kind of hit hard times. We had a decline in enrollment at the college, and we were really trying to sort through how we were going to make it financially. And so a problem hit us with turnover in the faculty, and we had faculty who were leaving in droves. And so we had to figure out how we were going to recruit people to stay here with the salaries we had. We're in the bottom 1% of the United States in salaries. And so we had to rethink how faculty relationships work and what a job environment was like. And so we came to some conclusions about having a flat kind of egalitarian norm that had been with our institution for a long time. We had a flat salary structure. Every rank, every department gets paid exactly the same, which is a real anomaly in education. We had super standardized promotion credentials. We got rid of research as a promotion credential. We realized that it had to be all about the students, but it had to stop being about the student's degree. We concluded it wasn't about the student's degree. It had to be about the student's lifetime. And so those kinds of things reoriented. And one of the consequences of that is that for the last 9 years we've been in the honor roll. The Chronicle of Higher Education runs this Great Colleges to Work For program. They have 15 criteria that you can succeed in an institution. In the United States, there's only 5 colleges that have been ranked in the top tier in 13 or more of these, and we're one of them. So we're one of the 5 absolutely best institutions to work for in the United States. And this has a huge spillover. Surrounding yourself with people who want to be where they're at generates a type of dynamic energy that pours into the curriculum. And so then we had a new set of challenges we're asking ourselves about exactly how we implement this long-term career path. And we realized that as we were looking at ourselves and our faculty, and we actually have, I would just say we have a tremendous amount of affection for each other. I mean, it's like a family, except you like everybody. It's such amazing environment to work in. You know, Christy and Jeremy and I have been on the road a bunch lately. We went to the KU Research Library to look at digitizing technology. You know, on Monday we're jumping in a car and we're going off to Salina, and you know, and we got together for breakfast the other morning, and the faculty and the students were involved in each other's lives. My hobby is vintage bicycle restoration. So Tuesday nights I have bike church at my house. And restoration students come over, we get pizzas and beers, and is this live streaming? And then we have work on vintage bicycles in my basement. And so through this kind of collaborative approach to the long term of the career, we've created a different set of relationships in academia. This here is the heart of a real curriculum. A real curriculum we typically assume to be a set of classes and requirements, but the real thing that drives, and by the way, every one of you knows this, one of the things that draws you to this, like Jeremy said, is the relationships and the integrity. And in this field, there's no substitute for integrity. In a field where there's a lot of money at stake and there's a lot of ways that people can fudge things, and where long-term relationships are actually the things that sustain you, there's no substitute for personal integrity. And so working with a group of people that are beloved by their students transforms the education. Because at the very heart of education, at the very heart of all education, you're asking someone to take something that they believe, and you're asking them to set it aside and exchange it for what you believe. And that's the fundamental dynamic, and it only happens in a position of trust and reliance. So I have a lot of things to say about the curriculum of how one teaches it, but it has to begin with a process of recruiting. And so while we were trying to figure out how we were recruit and get people to stay at a job that doesn't, by the way, our salaries are still low. I mean, seriously, we're in the bottom 10% of the United States. Kansas is in the median of the cost of living. But we still have low salaries, but we have places where people love to come to work in the morning, and so that bleeds over. So this is fundamental. You figure out how to recruit. You have to clarify your values about the careers, and then when you bring people to campus, you have to talk to them about that honestly. And one of the first things we lead off is, this doesn't pay much. You need to know it from the get-go before we even go down before we go down this path of even having an interview. You need to know up front, this isn't going to pay well. And we know, and here's our limits, and here's our problems, and you put them up in front, because you want people to make sure that they get the jobs that they want to have. And then, not just in recruitment, but in promotion, So you have to make sure that the promotion process and the incentive process for all of the staff across the whole institution is wed to the institutional goals of students' successful lives. And by successful, what we mean is the student becoming what they want to become. And that's what we mean, of them, being developmentally advanced. We have 5 separate fields that we have this in. I was thinking one way to illustrate what a profession in motorsports looks like is just to walk around this building. You have the press box, and you have the little archives, and you have people who are doing engineering of the building spaces and designing roads, and people who are managing crowd flow. And if you were to try to assemble all the marketing and all of the different kind of talent subsets that go into this one facility, you've captured already something that encompasses probably 20 or 30 the different professional preparations, and this is just the tip of the automotive industry. So providing a whole breadth of approaches, art and design, communications, history, management, and restoration is fundamental to this, because these are 18-year-olds that walk in the door. And a third of them are there because they like watching Fast and Furious. A third? A quarter? They love watching Fast and Furious, but we're going to tell them all kinds of amazing things. There were so many great, the presentations this morning, for example, made me think about exactly the stuff that we do. Thinking about West Virginia Motorsports, the context of rural life in the West Virginia, up in the mountains, and the impact of the Second World War and the economy. And you have to have liberal arts to do that. You have to have students that go through economics classes, and they go through history classes, and they understand what the Great Depression was. And Mark Howell, when he was talking about NASCAR on the moon, Mark, wow, that was brilliant. Thank you so much. But the Fourth Rover is right by us. We have an amazing aerospace museum 30 miles down the road. It's the only museum in the world that has a real V1 and V2 rocket there. And our Tech and Society class is going there next Thursday. So they roll into the school, thinking Fast and the Furious, and then next Tuesday we're looking and dissecting Nazi rocket motors from 1945. And they begin to appreciate the depth of the history that's required and the passion that you can have, because it ties to who they might be and who they want to be and their fascination for the world around them. And then the idea of acquiring research acumen, of the desire to be in the library, are things that flow out of this process of engagement. Good. Local economy. I love Jim Miller, by the way. I'm sorry, I got to hit the high points for this morning. It was such a great morning. But this idea of Watkins Glen as a counterculture, of the circus of Grand Prix, and it's always been on my short list to go to Le Mans, because it's a real circus in French culture. It's where everything goes, and you set aside in a very conservative cultural space things that you left behind. And then the gender issues are something that we put really front and center in our teaching. In social history of the automobile, when I begin teaching automotive racing, the very first thing I start with is Joan Cugnot and Alice Ramsey. So we start with women racers as the way of even introducing automotive racers. We have to produce students that are prepared for a different world than they're coming from. And so we need to provide a lot more DEI education for them, because their workplace is going to be dramatically different. And we have a notion often that big city kids are more broadly prepared than small city kids, That's a general conception we have. But it turns out for most people, all the way through their lives, they grow up with a small community of friends that they associate with, and they spend their time talking to them. Whether it's in Los Angeles, you actually have a very small circle of friends who tend to be very much like you. And then even if you're a small town, you have a small set of friends who are very much like you. And so we have another bonus of this really broad liberal arts program, where they're going to have to ask spiritual questions. They have to find out what their moral and ethical compass is like. And they're thrown in with people who are dramatically different. One London's Times bestseller list just placed us as the #1 most diverse Kansas in the Midwest, diverse campus in the Midwest. And the reason they said it is because you can't escape people who are different from you. because we have 800 students. If you go to the University of Kansas, you can hang out with all goth theater students who want to wear black lipstick. You can have your own little civilization on campus. You can't do that where we're at. And we have 1 out of 10 students are international students, and we place them in the workplace. I'm sorry, there's so many things to say. So let me get to some more concrete things here. By the way, I want to make sure that I should be stopping soon. Okay, good. So here's what I mean by history across the curriculum. So the 8 gentlemen that I identified previously represent textiles and metallurgy and in the classroom, but also I want to let you know they come from very different backgrounds. That our sheet metal specialist actually was an art historian, and he was a sculptor when we hired him. You know, and he's teaching sheet metal, and so we have all these different skill sets and dispositions. But at the bottom is this initial sequence of what we traditionally think of as a component set, but the component set is a physical component set of the car. And so the classes mirror that, but within each one of them, it has its own historical narrative, because you can't understand upholstery, actually completely appreciate it, unless you're also talking about the historical development of textiles and the machinery with which the textiles are being processed, the types of sewing machines. You can't understand the sheet metal development, the way the cars are made, the way they're made, and have the complete understanding unless you understand the different metallurgical processes, advances in materials development, and the types of machinery that was shaped to steel. And so every one of these classes, they're substantive, hands-on, muscle memory, touching classes. They have a lab component of working on it. They have a theory component, and every one of them has historical components embedded in it. The social history of the automobile, actually I'll skip forward to that and then come back, is structured around what I would call the historical component structure of the automobile. And it's important, and we give this to them early on, this class early on in their presentation, and this tends to be for them one of the classes that really opens them up, because it's a pretty easy case to argue that the automobile is the most significant technological change in the history of the planet, and that it is a central organizing aspect of every single thing we do in our lives. And when you can place the automobile in the context of someone's personal lives, it's going to determine who you date, where you work, how you spend time with your family, and how you define your family. And when you can put it in an existential context of the student's present and the student's future, they're ready to step beyond a wrench and go out and dig into a book. And so this happens, you know, it doesn't matter what field of human endeavor you're engaged in, at some point the automobile is going to be a significant question for how you live. And so it provides a perspective on history itself. And that's a second stage, along with history of automotive design, which is taught by our sculptor, that represent these specialized context courses. And then we advance into our research courses and methodology. So we want to make sure that we have a blend of hands-on and theoretical work about the physical artifact. And then we need to make sure that we have the research and methodological tools of archival, of vetting research materials, of search engines. And it can be, even if you have a mechanical bent, you need to know what the bolt heads were, how were they shaped, how are they stamped, how many stitches per inch go into the upholstery. And so you need research skills to go with that. And so we have a 3-stage process for that, which is an introduction to research methods, the technology and society, which is a broader theoretical class, the one that we're going to the Cosmosphere for spacecraft. And then we have historiography as an advanced research. These are all done at undergraduate. There's very few undergraduate sequences where they have 4 methodology classes. I don't know of any programs in the world, let alone an automotive restoration program, that have 4 specific historiographic and methodological courses within them. And then our senior thesis is, and one of the things that we really want to do is we want to make this like into a playground of knowledge. And so these central organizing concepts is we're going to give you specific case studies. We're going to draw on specific personages. For instance, you have to know, I have a short list. There's only 4 things you need to know to be an automotive historian. There's only 4 things you know. You need to know who Henry Ford is, you need to know what the Model T is, you need to know who Harley Earl is, and you need to know who Alex Tremulous is. And those 4 things. And if you know those things, that gives you the tools you need, because you can look at the lives of great men, you can look at the history of industrialization, you can look at the artistic expression, the way we engage with the car, the development, the globalization of the industry. And once you have those case studies, it lays a groundwork where you get to do what you want to do. And so it's kind of like presenting a buffet for the students, and then you cut them loose. And then you say, now, for your thesis, you're going to do anything you want, which includes, recently I've supervised theses on the history of the banjo, women in piracy. The list, it just goes places that would be totally unexpected, but they get to follow their dreams, they follow their passions, and they move on to the careers that they want to develop. And that's our history across the curriculum for the college. I don't actually know what to do with this. I know that the field of automotive history is so vast that Andrew mentioned this. He said we're scratching the surface. Well, there isn't anybody that gets to do much other than scratch the surface. If you get a narrow field, you get to scratch a little deeper in one thing. But how do you construct a broad appreciation for someone and make their life engaged in the content? And how do you become a representative of a field? And my gut answer is just that as an educator, and you want to convey to someone, you have to recognize that you're a bridge between the content and the person, the individual that's in front of you. And that there's a real big tendency in some parts of education where the obligation to the content swallows up the obligation to the person that's in front of you. The students are confused, they're unmotivated, they're hungover, they have all the things that go along with being a real college student. And to be the person who's actually going to take the student that's right in front of you and say, that's good, that's fine, you're hungover today, you know what? I did that too. And I'm going to accept you, and I'm going to just provide whatever I can to connect you with this material and help you find your passion. And my gut feeling is that every single thing I know about automotive restoration is a straight parallel for understanding the automobile as a sport. Because every one of these elements there's continuity. Because the impact on social structures, the impact on a sport, the impact on history, the role of fascism. The VP came to me yesterday. She said, we have Mussolini's Mistress coming to campus in a few weeks, which is the car that Mussolini attempted to flee. She says, could you prepare some notes and do a little public presentation? I said, yeah, I'd love to. Well, thank you. Now I have one. So that's, yeah. Questions? Oh, I have a handout. I have one more thing. This is really cool. You'll like this. Okay, thanks. Actually, here's what I did in class. I put a bunch of people over. It's the car that you fled where he failed. It's a reference to the car. Okay, so I did a lot of soul searching as I was trying to figure out exactly how this is going to work. Oh, I'm sorry. I'll get in front of the camera. I did a lot of soul searching. I was trying to figure out how this worked. Yeah, and there's probably close to enough some of you can share. But one of the things that happened is right now things are going so well for us. We're all so grateful for how well it's going. We have a whole set of challenges that almost no school has ever had before. Some of you know that recently we were given $1 billion, which is like 1,000 millions or something like that. It's a lot of money, $1 billion. And right now it's it's money that's been promised for the future. It's in the States, so we don't have any of it. It'll be arriving, it's dedicated, and so we're trying to really ask ourselves, what does this work with? What do we do with it? What is our dreams? What's our possibilities? And so as I was trying to assess that, I started looking exactly what is that we do right and why is it that we're working. And for some of you in academia, this ties really closely, but actually this ties to everybody who's in this discipline, because when we're communicating with someone we're trying to transmit, the first thing is you have the student experience, and then you have your institutional environment that you create for the students. And so these are things that I don't have the PowerPoint because this came to me afterwards, sorry. If you look at the student experience, so you have to have a long-term view of your complex student. A student is a complex creature who's moving into a world that's full of mystery and they don't know where to go. And Jeremy is grounded and solid. We love Jeremy, but Jeremy doesn't know where he's going. Sometimes there's a student who goes to college where they know where they're going, and hopefully they change their mind, right? Hopefully they learn something that sets them off in a different direction. So you need to have this breadth of liberal arts so that they're going to be able to read and write. We have five writing classes in our sequence. Our students can write when they leave, and you've got to be able to write. And we have public speaking sequences. They've got to be able to articulate the automobile as a dream, because this is the language. It's the language of dreams. That's what the automobile is all about. At the same time, you need to provide concrete experiences. 80% of our students go through internships across the whole institutions. That means psychology students, art students, theology students. They go to internships. We had 99% of our class of 2022 job placement within 6 months, 99%. And we had, of our students who wanted to go to graduate school, we had 90% placement rates in graduate schools, because we work internships and we work futures and career plans. We do that with the events, we do that so that we have an exploratory process where students have different gifts, but they don't know what they are. And it's so easy for us, as all of us in this room, to define ourselves by the things that we can't do. I can't do that because I don't have that skill. And it turns out that, most of life is just showing up. And then whatever modicum of skill you happen to have, you figure out how to leverage it. And so when you're working with a group of students where they all have different aptitudes, you have to, try to just get them up off the couch. I heard a really great quote the other day. It was like, nobody gets remembered for leaving butt prints in the sands of time. The first thing to do is just try to motivate people to get off the couch, to follow their dreams. We have the course content that has to be both substantive and methodology for the teach to fish for the methodology side. And then I'm going to go really long on this, finding the people to work with that actually are really ready to be student-centered. They're ready to make the leap of faith to say this is all about student success. And all of your careers and everything that happens, and it has to be really technically hard. And the people that in this room that know each other, that have been together for year after year, conference after conference, it's because you know that they're people that you care about because you're kind. You have to be really soft on humans. Humans are frail. And humans can't succeed unless you nurture them. It was beginning in the 1970s that the NFL started having professional counselors, like psychological assistants for every team player, because they realized that it's your emotional structure is what gives you the capacity to succeed. And especially in college life, many people don't know this. About 5 minutes. One last thing. Most people don't understand that how much college life has changed in the generation since I went to college. When I was in college, it was okay for the faculty to say, well, they were unmotivated, so I guess they're out of luck. They got messed up, something bad happened, and I guess they're out of luck. I got a student who came forward last week, it wouldn't tell me, someone else told me, his mother got shot in a drive-by. She's been in a coma for 5 weeks. And if he doesn't come to class, who's going to stop? Who's going to stop and intervene? That the real things that are the barriers to student success, rarely are they about intellect. Rarely are they about intellect. Usually it's about figuring how to get up out of bed in the morning. It's about trying to find some kind of sense of self-worth and self-dignity. And so if you have an educational infrastructure that's going to succeed, it actually has to deal with that if you want excellence, and it has to deal with that issue of alcoholism and drug addiction in your staff, and your colleagues, and personal lives, and divorces. And so it has to be technically hard, but it has to be humanly soft. And that's how you succeed in teaching auto history. Okay.
Thank you, Ken. We've got just a short time for any questions or comments. Yeah.
Do you accept vehicles for donation, and what do you do with cars when you finish restoring them?
Yeah, we gladly accept vehicles for donation, and in a lot of ways it's the kind of donation challenge that Christy has. We've had in the past where people want to send us cars to restore, but it's really horrible for them because what we do is when it's time to do a certain fender shape, we pull out the cars with that fender shape and we work on it. And so if were you to send us a car for restoration, we couldn't promise it would ever get done, so we don't do that. When we get cars for donations, sometimes we put them into our archive of cars that we use as sample works for students to look at and to understand and as teaching tools, you know, for suspension types and engines and radiators. And then sometimes on occasion we'll pick one as a restoration project. And in the past we've been giving free auction space at some prestigious auctions where we can auction those off and use it to support the education program. But as you know, maintaining a shop space with all these kinds of resources is really expensive. You know, tools, materials, liquids, paints, and it's an expensive proposition. And so we're always looking for, I would suggest if, there's a box up in front, you write a check on your way out, and we'll put it to good use. Seriously. Thank you all so much.